Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the VAK Indian History Podcast. I'm Utkarsh.
Namaskar, Sumedha from Switzerland, as always, but after a very, very long gap. And although I apologize for it, all of you will be happy to know that I was actually spending my time very productively engaged in deeper research on the Bharatiya Gyan Parampara. So it means I have more and more to offer to you in this podcast. So excuse me for the 6 months absence, but enjoy the fruits. So, Utkarsh, what are we going to do today?
Now, I was going to say that my absence wasn't quite as fruitful. I mean, some more musical instruments behind me, but nothing much when it comes to history. No, I thought that, the good thing about taking a break is that you tend to get out of the flow and tend to look at it from a more helicopter view, right? And then you kind of see the work that's done. And I'm actually quite happy with the breadth of topics that have been done. In fact, so much so that I actually have been re-listening to a lot of it, and I've been realizing that even though we've been the ones recording it, there's a lot of content that was very exciting to me when I heard it, but I forgot about it. There's nothing quite like revision, right? And there is so much rich material in there that I'm pretty sure that even you have forgotten about it because, in the flow, you hear it, you like it, but then you kind of forget. So what we want to do is we wanted to shine a spotlight on some of the very, very interesting stuff that we've talked about, but you kind of may have missed it. Maybe it was hidden away in a certain part of a certain podcast. Maybe you missed the podcast, so you shouldn't have. And we're going to kind of cover what we think are the six most exciting things that we uncovered during our 1.5, 2 year journey since we've started this.
Yeah, those six exciting things, we've tried to put them in ways that will interest you. If you saw that little spot that we made as a teaser to this, you saw that we tried to put them in very nice, pithy, and interesting, intriguing statements. And within those statements, there are a number of our episodes which would be included in that. So we are just trying to, get back into the stride, pull you back into the orbit of VAK Indian History Podcast. And although this is content, which as Utkarsh says is already there, it'll be presented to you in a different way and also in a way which will give you a sort of bird's eye view, a vihangam drishya as we call it in Hindi. Remember, we are also doing the VAK Hindi podcast and we will give you more episodes of it in 2026, right, Utkarsh?
Yes, huh?
Yes, that's
Starting right here.
that's the way. So,
Okay,
where should we start?
so I do want to start with something that I will ask you to speak about, but I want to give some setting for it because this is kind of how I was thinking about it. We all know the most infamous voyage in the history of the world. Christopher Columbus going to America thinking it's India, right? And it's famous. The consequences of it, we live by it even today. But the reality is that there is an even more, I would say, much, much more consequential voyage that changed the world. It also affects us in every way. It affects the way you look at time. It affects the very reason that certain things work, like say aeroplanes or even the space program, right? Pretty much all of modern life is based on this one voyage. And the best part is no one talks about it. It may be there, it's historically recorded, but no one really knows about it. And we've talked about it, but we also never thought of it in this way. So, what I want you to talk about is tell us about the voyage that changed the world that no one knows about and when it happened.
A voyage which changed the world. How right you are to put this in this perspective, Utkarsh, because no one ever thinks of Francis Xavier's voyage from Lisbon to Goa in 1571 as a voyage which perhaps changed the world. How did it do so? So, the Jesuits of Portugal had been spreading themselves across the world mostly for the purpose of evangelization. And wherever they went, whatever information or knowledge they gathered was put to the service of the church. So the Jesuits had come to India in search of Hindu math. Yes, you heard it right. They had come in search of Hindu math. Remember, at that time, there was that very, very famous Kerala school of mathematics, the one which actually started and discovered calculus, although calculus has a long history behind that also. And the Jesuits who came to Goa and then spread to other parts of South India and then to India collected a lot of mathematical knowledge, One of the most important things being calculus. And we have a couple of episodes on this on ancient Indian math, how it was disseminated through the shipping and land trade routes, and how it went from India to the Middle East to Europe, and what were the places which actually played a role in this dissemination. And we have referred to Bhaskar Kamble's great book, we have referred to C.K. Raju. Now, all the things that Utkarsh said, why is it dependent on this voyage? Because the Jesuits stole calculus from India. So the most famous name in that is the name of Christopher Clavius. And again, go back to the episode on calculus, we've talked about it. And when calculus went back or was taken to Europe, what happened? They had lost track of their calendar. The equinoxes were moving all around the place. The Gregorian calendar was an effort to stop this from happening, change over from Julian to Gregorian. So this was helped by the math that they took, by the calculus that they took. There was a great impetus to navigation. And what did navigation lead to? It led to colonization. What did colonization lead to? It led to wealth transfer. It led to the spread of imperial and absolutely brute power across the world. Many countries were devastated, including India. So you see, this voyage was really, really far reaching. Calculus is central to Western civilization. So therefore, it is very difficult for them to admit. They insist on giving the credit to Leibniz and to Newton. And it is only very rarely that you will find any mention. Just open Wikipedia and type in the words was calculus stolen from India and then see the kind of apologism that comes through. So anyway, this is something that we have dealt with. This is also, we've told you that math was very old in India. There was geometry in the form of a Vedang. So voyages that changed the world should include this one of the Jesuits to India. But I don't know when we are going to reach that level of, what can I say, self introspection by the West. In the colonized countries, we are slowly waking up to this fact. And a lot of us are spending time decolonizing many facts. But let's see how it goes.
Yeah. And you mentioned it, which kind of was a good segue into the second part of it, which was wealth transfer, right? Which is what all the knowledge that was stolen, frankly, after and during that voyage and many voyages that came later was did enable. So I want us to do a very quick mental exercise to imagine this, right? We think of the US today, right? Massive, most powerful country, most rich country, more importantly, between what, 25% of global GDP, roughly there. And within the US, you can look at the microcosm of, say, California, a small
4.1
part of the,
trillion. It's the fourth largest economy in the world
yeah,
if you look at it separately.
correct. I think it's about 4% of global GDP, something like that, around 4%, 5%, 3%, depending on where you are, right? So California, US, super powerful, super rich, California within that, even richer. Now, what you can imagine is just imagine just something happens. I don't know. A foreign power gains, there's weak leadership in the US, foreign power gains stronghold, whatever it might be. Imagine that something like that happens in the US and all of its wealth and all of its power over, say, a period of 1 or 2 centuries gets taken out. So that 2 centuries later, you go back, the guy from Planet of the Apes, the astronaut who had time dilation and came back later to Earth. Suppose he does that, he comes back to the US, he notices, oh my God, this is no longer the richest country in the world. This is perhaps one of the poorer ones. Instead of 25% global GDP, it's 2% of global GDP, one-tenth of a share of what it used to be. And good old California, oh my God, it is even poorer than the rest of the US. And more so, the idea of being a Californian is like seen as some sort of almost subhuman. This is effectively the slave labor for the world because people here are so poor. They emigrate overseas to try and make a living. This sounds rather fanciful, but the reality is that this exact thing has happened. This is really the tale of India and Bengal because the numbers also match so well. It's not even funny, right? Before colonization, before the British Empire, India, close to 25% of global GDP for the longest period of recorded history. Within India, Bengal, which is, of course, modern day West Bengal and Bangladesh, richest part, right? All the innovation comes from there. One of the great trade centers, super rich. People seek out
Industrialized. Industrialized.
industrialized, right? And now what? If I look at even my country, Singapore, most of the workers are Bangladeshi because they don't have any jobs over there. They come here and do. In the Middle East, all of those monuments in the deserts have been built on the slave labor of all of those laborers, stuff like that, right? So you literally have a case where what used to be one of the richest parts of the world has now become one of the poorest over 200 years. So this is which is what we call perhaps, we call it perhaps the rape of California, hypothetical, but this is the real world rape of Bengal and to a
India.
larger extent, India
Bharat.
or Bharat over the last 200 years.
Yep.
Okay. So that's
Yes.
the second topic we had. What
Mm.
was the third one? Oh, yes, I remember now.
Oh, but Utkarsh, I'd just like to interject
Yeah.
a little bit of a few numbers, perhaps, to make
Yes,
people
please.
understand this better. So
Absolutely.
there is a academic called Utsa Patnaik. She's done a detailed study, and she says that $45 trillion were transferred from Bharat to the UK, to the British Empire between 1765 and 1938. So these are modern numbers. I mean, 45 trillion in today's numbers. So 45 trillion dollars is not a joke. Just think of it's more than the current world GDP. It's
No,
more
no,
than
it's not. 45
45
trillion.
trillion. Yeah,
It's
it is.
about half,
What is the world
roughly.
GDP today?
I think it's about 100 trillion, if I'm not mistaken. China's about 20. Somebody's going to fact check us because
Okay,
we have Google.
okay. But if so,
But
I
it's
can correct it. Yeah.
but even
But
then, the number's
yeah,
massive. Yeah,
yeah, the number is massive. Say 50%
yeah,
world GDP.
yeah, yeah.
So, this is the kind of transfer which took place, and not just wealth. A lot of information and knowledge was also transferred from post
Yes,
colonized countries, including Bharat. And in our episodes, we have dealt with so many of these things.
yeah,
We've talked to you about math. We've talked to you about, ideas which were stolen, or
mm,
games which are disseminated. Chess, for example. Chess
mm,
originated from India. Martial arts. We did that section on Bodhidharma. So
mm,
many things for which no credit is given to India, and in fact, sometimes I feel, Utkarsh, that we may sound like broken records. That yes, this originated in India. Yes, this also originated in India, but it happens to be the truth because this is
yeah,
the oldest civilization, the oldest standing Bronze Age civilization. There are many things
yeah,
which started from here, and they went from here to the Middle East and then to the European landmass. That's
yeah,
something.
yeah.
And Utkarsh, just a little interjection. There is the INS Condinnia, which has just reached Oman from
Mm,
Porbandar using the technology of the 5th century, seen in the Ajanta caves paintings, a stitch ship which used just wind power to reach Oman from Porbandar. And this perhaps, was one of the first voyages which was ever carried out by somebody from India. It's because of the pre-monsoon and post-monsoon winds that it can go. It is a exemplification and validation of ancient technology which existed, and it was through such shipping routes that all
mm,
kinds of goods, people, ideas, etc. first traveled and were disseminated, and later
mm.
were expropriated and stolen. So transfer of wealth and transfer of so many other things.
Yeah. And exactly. And I think the point that you made that we sound like a broken record, I would dare say we almost sound jingoistic because it is
Yes.
such a strange thing to say, oh, this is ours. Oh, this is ours. We did this too. We did that too. It does come across like that. But the reality is that sometimes facts are like that, right? And sometimes what seems a little bit unbelievable sometimes really is because certain circumstances and time and confluence of events have kind of combined to create this. And there's also kind of this interesting bias that we have due to our time, because which brings me to my next topic very conveniently, the story of a chicken, which we're going to get to, and a dinosaur. But the thing is, if you think of the chicken today, which is probably the humblest creature, right? You've got multiple KFCs, etc. It is far from cool. It is literally bread and butter in a
Yeah, beef
non-veg sense.
is an insult, Utkarsh.
Yeah, it's an insult.
It's an insult. Yeah.
Yeah. And on the other hand, you have the epitome of a predator, though it really was not a predator according to science, but everyone thinks it was the
Yeah.
Tyrannosaurus Rex,
Yes.
right? And that is, if you think what is cooler, obviously the T Rex is cooler. The T Rex, talk about Jurassic Park, that famous scene where they're waiting inside, right? And you can see the shadow of the T Rex and everything. But the thing is, if you think about what that T Rex is in today's context, if you think about what happened to dinosaurs, they did mostly die out, but some of them survived and they evolved. And the modern day dinosaurs are birds, basically. There was a lot of debate about this 20 years back in academic circles. It's been resolved. Some of dinosaurs had feathers as well. There's a very interesting parallel here because as we have these conversations, we take the country of India today, the nation state, which is a third world country, quote unquote, which is a country that's relatively poor, low GDP per capita, a source of cheaper labor for many different countries. And when we say that, hey, guess what? This country is actually the source of a lot of the knowledge and a lot of advancement in the world, people look at us like, really? Not just that, this country is also, or rather, this civilization is not just a source of a lot of things, it's also much older than you think. For people who go around searching for ancient aliens and ancient civilizations, people like Graham Hancock, oh, back in the youngest Dryad period, there was this, there was that. They go looking for all sorts of far fetched theories. Then reality is you have a civilization of people that are practically unbroken in tradition for a period longer than what most Western historians would like to admit. It's that kind of confluence that that it's a stark contrast between a underdeveloped country that they see today versus what is an old ancient cool civilization, much like a chicken versus a
So the
apex
T-Rex
predator.
walks again.
T-Rex never went
It
away. You just
never went away. And the aliens never went away. They're here in the shape of you and me.
yeah,
That's
I
an
think the
interesting
bigger part
thought.
of it is, the main thing of that is how do we really give a tangible example. Think about marriage traditions. The kind of traditions that was followed in my marriage or yours would have a connection to something that happened, say, 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, people getting married, right? That's one simple
In
example.
a sense, as we had shown in our episode on marriage, the ceremony has remained unchanged. And that
Yeah,
ceremony was actually put in place by a woman, Surya Savitri. So you're right.
correct.
There's so many things which have remained unchanged, Utkarsh. In fact, I love to say this. If you look at me, for example, I am like a palimpsest of so many things. You know, the things I wear on my hands, these bangles, these are given by the Indus Valley civilization. The sindoor and bindi, given by the Indus Valley civilization. So many things. And this sari, the way I wear it, given by Rabindranath Tagore's family. So you can actually trace a straight line in the for the past thousands of years in the figure of any Indian that you care to look at.
And also the belief system, right? So whoever, if you look at the ancestors of the Europeans or the Egyptians, their gods or their whatever higher powers are today cartoon characters or Thor or Marvel characters, right?
Oh, yeah. Hollywood
Thor
was
has gone
making
from
them.
become a Marvel character, Chris Hemsworth or whichever of the, I don't know who, whatever the actor's name is. Whereas for us, 7,000, 8,000 years ago, if it was Shivji was worshipped, then he's worshipped today as an example, right? So it's the same. The belief system has sustained, which is also remarkable in a way. And that's something people don't realize. And a big reason for that is I feel that Western history and by consequence, history taught all over the world has this assumption that till there was Western civilization, everything else was savagery and unadvanced. And then you had the civilizing effect,
Yes.
which is kind of completely wrong. And one of the reasons
Yeah.
why we do this
The white
podcast,
man
frankly,
curtain civilized the entire world.
yeah, and linked to civilizing the entire world and having this bias that anything Western is good and the West is the best. The West must be the origin of great ideas. This brings us to our next topic, which is the tale of two symbols. One symbol loved by the world, which is Om. You see it everywhere. You might even see it in one of my guitars because some of the guitarists really love it. It's very linked to music and all sorts of good feelings, good vibes. And then you have
I
the
would
other
say it
symbol.
comes from the flower power, the hippie revolution of the
Yeah,
60s,
I mean, we have to thank George
the
Harrison and the rest of the
Beatles.
Beatles going to Rishikesh in the 60s.
Yeah.
Actually, that was we should recover that sometime because that itself was probably the reintroduction to the West of maybe some Indian ideas. And then you have on the other side of Om, you have a symbol that is, people hate it. Today. You can't put it out there just like that, other than if you're in India, which is the swastika. And the interesting thing is, both the swastika and Om are very near and dear to Indians. Both have a slightly different meaning, but very near and dear. The reason why the swastik is considered to be what it is globally actually comes down to plain basic racism. Because the reason why the swastik was considered mistakenly something by the Germans and then adopted by Hitler was down to an assumption that good ideas must have come from the West. Swastik must have come from this hypothetical ancient race of world conquerors. It could not have come from India because they discovered the Indian symbol swastik in Troy. So that was something that we found fascinating, that the source of swastik being hated is basically fundamental misassumption that the West has to be the best.
Yeah, and it was down to the misuse of this symbol,
Hmm.
it becoming the symbol of some of the worst things that have happened in history, you know. So if you associate it with the genocide of Jews, then you're not going to love it. It's necessary that we do the hard work, the hard lifting, Utkarsh, of removing that, of pointing out the fact that it was also perhaps not exactly the swastik, it was the Haken Cruz, which was
Hmm.
used by Hitler, looked a little
Hmm.
similar, but there are differences between the two, as we
Yes.
have discussed. And when it later became a terrible thing, this genocide of the Jews and Hitler's actions, then to dissociate it from the church, it was pinned onto the swastik. So it's so much easier to denigrate and to paint black and tar someone else. It may
Yeah.
have been your own symbol, but you try and do it with someone else. And we've talked about this in our podcast. We've spoken. I think we had a entire episode on this, right, Utkarsh? We had an
Yeah.
entire
Yeah. We did. We did. Yeah. One of
yeah,
my favorite episodes, actually, because it was, the whole story of how there was this German businessman, what is his name, Schliemann, who was
Schliemann,
obsessed with
yeah,
trying to
Schliemann.
find the Helen of Troy and then all of that. Very fascinating
Yeah,
story. So
yeah. So
definitely
you
check out that
must go
episode.
back to that. You must go back to that episode and watch it.
Yeah. Speaking of Nazis, or rather people who unfortunately get connected to them because they raised their hand in the wrong way. I'm talking about Elon Musk here, right? He once waved in the wrong way and they said he's doing the Nazi symbol. But speaking of Elon Musk, that's a very nice way to connect the whole topics. We're quite obsessed with one particular thing, which is super consciousness, super AI, super being. So there's an interesting thing here. If you look at how the West looks at consciousness, and if you look at how the Indic tradition looks at consciousness, it'll tell you something very, very interesting. It'll tell you that this entire quest to create a super consciousness is perhaps invalid, because the question that, or rather the mission that is being sought after, is incorrect. Because the way the West looks at consciousness, which is a very material based way, versus how the Indian tradition looks at consciousness, is very different. So do you want to shed some light on what we talked about in the
Yeah,
consciousness
remember
episode?
when we did this episode, Utkarsh, we picked up the basic question: does consciousness give rise to matter, or does matter
Yes.
give rise to consciousness? So, in the West, it has always been thought that some configuration of matter in some particular way will suddenly give rise to consciousness. Whereas for the Vedic Indic tradition, it's entirely different. In the beginning, even before anything, there was consciousness. In fact, it is because of consciousness that everything else has come into being. And we discussed this in good detail, and giving you all the different ways in which consciousness has been dealt with in the different systems of philosophy, Sankhya, Yoga, etc. So if this topic interests you, you must go and listen to it again, and then get in touch with Elon Musk and tell him why he's wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe he reads things
You
on
need to
Twitter.
do it via meme, though. He only reads memes. He doesn't have time for anything else.
Okay, okay. Well,
I'm guessing.
that's not my area of expertise. So perhaps somebody else make a meme on this, and maybe it'll go viral enough, because from matter arises consciousness is a very limited and very superficial kind of view, which
Yeah.
will, I am sure, even so-called Western science will lead up to the same thing. Although, which reminds me, Utkarsh, aren't they simulating a brain? In the next few days, I read somewhere that they're making a configuration or whatever it is, and then it's going to start simulating a brain. So let's see what happens to that.
I think simulating machinery is never difficult. It's about what is the thing that is having the experience. You cannot verify that unless you are the one having the experience. So anyway, we can get back into the consciousness episode very easily.
Yeah.
Talking about places where we believe that the Western tradition may be a little bit mistaken, right? We talked about consciousness. There's another one. And this is where we think that because of the burden of the way the West thought about this topic, we are kind of given that burden unnecessarily, and which is essentially the status of women, right? Because the West has this long tradition where women were definitely second class citizens. We know what Aristotle thought of them. We know we can go back even 100 years. It wasn't that
What did
great till this.
Augustine think of them?
Obviously,
That great
yeah,
seer of Christianity in the 4th century.
yeah, till the suffragettes came, I don't think too many people were that concerned. I mean, and they were, but I mean, I'm just saying it's very recent. The, and feminism came from the right place because there was a need for it. And of course, now it's gone to places we've talked about in other episodes, or episodes on wokeness, for example. But the point is, because the West had this entire repressive attitude towards women till very, very recently, and perhaps still it's a very strange attitude. There's a little bit of a competition of the sexes going on in the West. It is greatly assumed because they just impose what has been going on here. They try to impose their structures on understanding a different civilization. So the same is assumed for India. India must be the same way. It must be patriarchal, whatever is the right
Must
word.
be
So what
worse. It must be patriarchal or worse.
patriarchal?
Because
Yeah,
if we are bad, they must be worse. They have to be
correct.
worse. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And this is where we started our journey in the VAK Indian History Podcast, talking about the divine feminine and basically the role of women in India. So maybe you want to share a couple of things that we had talked about right at the beginning of
Yes.
this podcast.
Yes. This was, in fact, episode 1 in October 2024. And we had called it Devi, Sati, and
2023.
Empire. 23. Oh
Yes.
my God. It's been a long, long time. It's been a long, long time. Well, let's
Yeah.
hope that this year we put in many more episodes than we put in last year. So, in that episode, Utkarsh, you had asked me a lot of questions which you felt were actually arose because of what you read, or because of what you see, or because of what is the situation in India. And we try to delve into the truth behind all these assertions. So, some of the shortcut acid attacks against Indian women, sati, child marriage, dowry, and bride burning. We dealt with all this. We had separate episodes on this, and
So we did the dowry and the child marriage thing in the
uh,
marriage episode, and we did
yeah,
sati in this original
in
episode.
the first one we did
Yeah.
sati, and one more thing in the Devi, Sati, and Empire. Yeah.
Mm.
So, Sati, we pointed
Yeah.
out how Sati had been, all these things were, in a sense, they were straw men created to show you that this whole Hindu civilization was terrible. And then, see, we are going to reform this civilization. We are going to ban this, that, and the other. And therefore, you will now come up to the Comity of Nations as a reformed civilization, as
Yeah.
much like the Christian one as possible. But the
I
truth
think it's very
behind
much the colonizers need to
it, yeah,
justify their
exactly.
plunder under the guise of moral improvement.
Exactly. And you watch episode 1, and I think it was episode 7, and you'll get the details. But what I do want to link it to here is something even larger. In the whole colonization efforts, basic things were tinkered with. There was a way in which this polity and society were organized. Everything was at the village level. So, a number of things were, for example, education of women. A number of things were funded at the village level. Village schools were funded by the village money, and something was set aside. There were temples which got a lot of money. Those temples used to set aside money for education. And if you want to go back even to the 18th century, forget about very long ago. For that, we have different evidence which I have mentioned. But in the 18th century, there were gazetteers which the British themselves reported, made for each district. Look at the data for education of all castes. We have dealt with caste also in our episode number 2, to tell you the truth of Varna and Jati. And all Jatis and all Varnas, and also girls. All of them were educated. If you look at the data for the 18th century, for example, for Madras presidency or for some other presidencies, because everything used to happen at the local level. Then revenue laws were changed. The whole financial system of the country was changed, and all the money was directed towards the center, and then from the center back to the UK. So this whole thing came crashing down. Therefore, the education of women suffered, the position of women suffered. Remember, in our episode on dowry, we explained how the change of the revenue rules, the change of laws, disenfranchised financially, and ownership, communal ownership, and ownership of women was completely removed from the laws of the Brits, because they thought that only the man could be the owner of a particular piece of land. So a piece of land which was owned by the whole family, including the women, was taken away from them and given only to one man. So things like this had the effect of breaking the scaffolding and structure of Indian society, in which what is the concept? The concept is of Ardhanarishwar. That means men and women together have to complement each other and make up all of society. That whole concept was hit again and again and again, and a lot of it was broken up by the 19th 20th century, because of colonization and because of the poverty which was widespread. The society and polity were really in a bad shape, but the blame for that was given to Hindu thought, Hindu religion, Sanatan Dharma, and not to colonization. So it was a way of, uh, shrugging away all the blame. We discussed this in the episode on caste also, Utkarsh, about
Yeah.
how the whole economic system was also broken down.
Hmm.
And when the results were terrible, the blame was given to who? The blame was given to Brahmins. And since then, they have been the scapegoats for everything that happens in India. There was this structural level tinkering which still exists. That tinkering still exists. And what I am trying to do in my own research, which is called Bharatiya Gyan Parampara, is to trace all this back and try and go back to first principles and see if we can get those first principles back again. Let us see.
Yeah. So there you have it. Those are the six topics that we thought popped out of all that we've discussed. But worry not, we will also discuss new things. So coming
Yes.
up this year, since we are back, we aim to have one, a lot more episodes, and to cover a lot of topics we've been meaning to talk about. I think STEM in particular is something we really want to cover in more detail. We've talked a
Surgery,
little bit about,
ancient
yeah,
Indian surgery,
ancient
surgical
Indian surgery.
instruments. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ayurveda, yoga also, we've not really done.
yeah, correct. And yoga is something which really we should cover, because that is something that, if I look at, it's very interesting how this entire thing has been secularized, right? Because it has been completely stripped away of its Indian or Hindu origin. If you think
Yeah.
about yoga, if you think about meditation, uh, you know, and which is okay if it makes it more accessible, but also a little bit wrong, because then you're kind of not
That's
attributing
called
something to a thought
appropriation,
process.
Utkarsh.
Yeah, yeah,
It's called appropriation
yeah.
by other cultures.
Yeah, and you listen to people, right? If you take someone like I was listening to very undisconnected thing, Ray Dalio, hedge fund, big founder of the biggest hedge fund. Now he's stepped down from it, doing other stuff. He was basically saying that meditation is an essential part of how he managed everything, stress and everything, right? So I think there is something here that we will want to probably talk about, the Indian
Yes,
part that you see all
meditation
over
we
the.
should definitely talk about. And you know what? Meditation in the traditional sense, as well as how it is actually now being rediscovered and redone. And one
Yeah.
good thing is that Indians are also now commencing research on yoga on their own terms. So I am doing my research at IIT Delhi, and there is a group of young people who is doing kind of modern neuroscience related research on yoga. Let's see how it all pans out. But I think it's a
Mhm.
good beginning, and we can do something on that too. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the people who are listening, whatever you want to listen to, whatever you've missed on the VAK Indian History Podcast, please tell us. This time we promise to be more responsive, right, Utkarsh?
Yes. And you promise, as in you, other side of the screen, promise to watch all the episodes fully.
Yes, please watch, please subscribe, and please share. Remember, we are relaunching ourselves with this episode after a long time. Some of you may have forgotten us. I rely on the others to jog the memories of those who have forgotten us. Please share widely. Please bring us back into the conversation. We were out, but we are in again. And we gave you a little peek into what we've done in the past 2 3 years. There were other things also. Remember the concept of Bharat. We discussed Ram Janmabhoomi also. So maybe we'll discuss the Somnath temple now. We are, the world is our oyster. Looked at from
Absolutely.
Indian point of view, but the world is our oyster, and we are ready to do whatever you like. So, hoping very hard to hear from you.
Yep. Great. So thank you for joining this reintroductory episode, and we'll see you soon with a new fun topic.
Namaskar. See you soon.